let's talk about the NAR settlement. So basically, they just had their settlement. But what's really coming out of this is going to affect, the general public and realtors. Is that one piece is that they've agreed to put in place a new MLS rule prohibiting offers of brokerage compensation on the MLS, meaning that offers of broker compensation could not be communicated via the MLS, but they could continue to that could continue to be an option consumers can pursue off MLS through negotiation and consultation with their real estate professionals. Past that, there is going to be a new rule set to go into place mid-July this year that would require MLS participants working with buyers to enter into an agreement with the buyers. NAR continues, as is done for years, to encourage its members to use buyer brokerage agreements, which a lot of people don't do till the last minute as a formality, and help the consumers understand exactly what services and value provided and for how much. So I have questions of your take on it, but what's your general take on what you know so far?
Boy, what a mess. What a mess that has been created, unnecessarily in my opinion. It all started with some sellers thinking they would take a shot on a lawsuit. They got some really sharp lawyers, and thinking that they shouldn't have to pay an agent, a buyer's agent, to work against them.
It's a good way to put it.
So what happens, obviously, as you know, that you make an agreement with a seller hires you to represent them, and you say, this is the way it has worked. This is, our fee is whatever it is, 5-6%, and we split that. We offer half of it as compensation in the MLS to a buyer's agent. So the sellers have always had the ability to not pay a commission. They always have. They can sell it on their own. Now, you may not agree with me, or your listeners may not agree with me, but I just think that the sellers always had this option, and I don't see what the big problem is really at this point. But now we do have a problem. When you talk about the exclusive buyer agency, for as long as I've been in this business, and I started in this business before there was a buyer agency. And I never have a buyer agency signed prior to making an offer. I just don't feel it's necessary. I feel that, hey, I've interviewed the buyer. I feel that the buyer is sincere, and I don't need to put a contract in front of them. Now, what the Department of Justice, because they're part of the equation here. They don't want sellers to pay buyers commission, buyer agent commission. So I think that what they're created is just a real nightmare here. No one knows how this is going to turn out. I can't see buyers automatically, just because the Justice Department has said, hey, you should have, or this settlement states that you should have some type of exclusive buyer agency signed, that doesn't mean that they're going to do it, that they're going to be willing to do it. I think that it's going to be it'll be a long time before that becomes an accepted practice. So it's really going to be very interesting where this goes. And to be honest with you, I really don't know where it's going to go.
Okay. So it was always, when I had my license before, it was always kind of talked about amongst realtors that if you don't offer the right commission, like split, when you're working with a seller, that buyer's agents, whether it's the right thing to do or not, if they saw there was a crappy commission split or no commission split, they wouldn't show the house. It was a concern. Mm-hmm. Not saying it happened or how much it happened, if it did at all. But now you have this scenario in place. But going back to the buyer agency agreement, there is the portion in there that says, in the event that the seller is not willing to pay me this commission, you will agree to cover that, right?
Correct.
So now what's going on is kind of forcing that piece that was really never a factor, or rarely a factor, is now going to be a big deal.
Right.
So with that being the case, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but isn't it going to be now, not that it's built into the mortgage, but because the seller, the way things have been working, it was almost like the buyer could, whether that's technically how it's happening, they not paying that extra on top of everything to buy the house. It was kind of going in, and it could almost be argued that it's part of the mortgage.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that what's not going to happen is I don't think that you're going to see prices decrease because the because buyers are now needing to negotiate with their agents and figure out how they're going to pay their agents. Now, I think that there's going to be some methods where you can offer seller assist and things like that to compensate for it. We'll have to see where this goes. The thing is right now is that the way the system has worked is, yes, the commission that the seller is offering is baked into the sale price. And what it has allowed the buyers to do is to finance that commission that the seller is paying instead of them taking it out of their pocket. Now that they're going to be asked to take it out of their pocket or figure out a way to pay your buyer's agent, figure it out. Whereas before they could finance it because the seller was paying it, and the seller may say, okay, well, I got to, if you put the commission in a transfer tax, I want to net a certain amount, so this is where we got to be. Of course, that's not the way you set the price, but not many sellers think like that. But the thing is that what you've allowed the buyer to do is to finance the buyer agency cost in the mortgage. That's what it has allowed them to do instead of taking the money out of their pocket or figuring out where it's coming from.
Right. So so if you just do the basic math, so let's say the commission is 3% that a buyer's agent gets, right?
Right.
On a $500,000 house, $15,000 that they will need to come up with out of pocket on top of closing costs and everything they need to purchase the home. That's a lot of money for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing is, how are you going to offer a seller assist that's going to help cover that? Because it cannot be more than what the actual closing costs are. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this has worked out. To be honest with you, I don't know how it's going to work out, and I don't think too many people know how it's going to work out. I think that it could drive more people towards dual agency, buyers towards dual agency, which really they're not getting the proper representation. I think the whole thing that really got this whole thing rolling, and if you think about it, it's a legitimate point, is that you got a seller that is paying a commission for somebody to market their property and represent them in the sale of the property. Then they're also paying that same amount, because we're splitting it equally, to a buyer's agent to work against them. So that point is well taken with me anyhow. But the fact of the matter is that the seller is still coming out, everybody's coming out a winner because, as I said, the buyer is able to buy their house. Why? Because they're financing the cost of the buyer agency through the mortgage, and they're paying a higher price. Now, I just don't think sellers, once buyers start paying, if this is going to happen, theoretically, if they start paying their agents, I don't think that you're going to see prices come down. I think sellers are going to still sell at market price.
They're probably thinking, because I'm not paying this, I'm going to make even more money.
Well, they're going to net more. Yeah, sure.
But part of how they're kind of kicking themselves in the butt in a little bit of a way, because think of how many buyers what percentage of buyers did you just price out of being able to afford your house? So now less buyers means less demand, essentially, which means your prices either don't go up, don't keep going up, or maybe they have to come down.
Well, time will tell.
Yeah.
Because it is a very complex matter, and I really kind of thought when this all started, this will find a way to work itself out, but it has really turned into a real mess.
Yeah. I do think I think it's going to be interesting, but what I was reading in the beginning was actually right from NAR's website. It sounds like if the buyers and selling agents can actually explain to the general population the right way the pros and cons to doing it this way, but they're still saying you just can't offer it officially in the MLS,
Well,
but it could be worked
that
out.
is-
You could maintain status quo if it's explained properly.
I just, well, there's a ton of information on Zillow. There's a ton of information on homes.com, Redfin, right? Now, I hate to knock the local MLS because I'm on it every day, but two important things in the MLS for me, two things. I just had this discussion with one of my colleagues this morning. One is I'm going to go on there and I'm going to look at who the agent is selling the property. If I'm showing, I want to know who the agent is. Why? Because I've been around a while. I want to know if it's somebody I've worked with before and had a good experience with. Number two is I'm going to look and see what kind of compensation I'm being offered for my services. And number three is if I'm going to show that property, I can easily just click on the Showtime button and set up the appointment to show. So those three things are what I generally look at when I'm looking for properties to show my buyer clients. And that's the real value of the MLS. Now you're taking away at least one. I don't know how much I'm going to be compensated. The other thing is Zillow owns showing time. So they could separate that. So what's that going to leave me?
Maybe Zillow becomes national.
Well,
MLS.
I don't know. We just don't know.
Yeah.
I think one of the big problems is, okay, how do I find out? To be honest with you, Brian, I'm not going to work for anything, for nothing. And I don't know too many agents that will. And I need to know what I'm going to be compensated. There's got to be some way of knowing what you're going to be compensated for.